about it, maybe you find something better or even the same thing, then at least remains your mind. Why? So the question is this. Why in the Quran God is not described by a word which comes from the root adl? I'm not saying he's not described as being just. No, he's described being just, but he's not described by using a derivative of adl. Otherwise we have qa'iman bil qist. Do some research about this, inshallah. So, the Quran says God does not do zulm, and the Quran says that God treats us with adl. But with different terms. Then he says there are different attitudes to this issue. Raveshha va mashrabha. Ravesh means methods. Mashrab means approach, attitude. Mashrab. Mashrab means a place of drinking, but it is used for attitudes. Like, people go to, when there is river, people choose different ways to reach the river. There's different attitudes. Mashrab. Okay? So, Ahl Hadith, the people of Hadith. And I told you before, when we say Ahl Hadith, we don't mean people who respect Hadith or are interested in Hadith or people who narrate Hadith or who are Muhaddis. Ahlul Hadith is a special title. Who are Ahlul Hadith?
That's one of the school of Kalami school.
Actually, they are not even mutakallim. These are the people who are not in favor of kalam, let alone philosophy. They say just take the hadith and Quran literally and don't discuss that much. Yeah? We tell you do mubahisa. They say don't do mubahisa, just repeat. You can do muzakara, but no discussion. Just repeat. Okay? Yes.
What's the difference between Ahl Hadith and Akhbari?
Akhbari are different. Ahlul Hadith are Sunni scholars, like Ahmad ibn Hanbal and this type of people. Akhbari is a Shia movement that actually they are not against kalam. They have a very strong interest in kalam. Maybe they are not very interested in philosophy, but they are very interested in kalam, and they say that we cannot understand Zawahir al-Quran by ourselves. We should refer to the hadith to understand Zawahir al-Quran. But they are not against aql or kalam. Yeah. So, Ahlul Hadith, when it comes to issue of justice and things like this, they say you don't need to discuss. Just accept whatever is mentioned in the Quran and Hadith and say the same thing. They don't have such concern about this. And Ayatollah Mutahari says this idea is not acceptable. And he says we have discussed this in the volume 5 of Usul Falsafe wa Ravish Realism, Principles of Philosophy and the Method of Realism. He says we should engage in this discussion and reflect and try to analyze. Mutakallimin are divided in two major groups when it comes to this issue. Ash'arites and Shiite and Mu'tazilites. So Ash'arites on one side and Shia and Mu'tazilites on the other side. And these are called Adliyah, the people of justice. Ash'arites don't deny justice of God, but the way they interpret justice is as if they don't believe in justice. Because they say justice does not have any meaning prior to religion, prior to God. Whatever God says or does is just. So there is nothing to introduce as standards independent standard for justice. We say whatever God does is just. They also say whatever God does is just, but we mean different things.
How did they interpret when the Caliph said kill the father? It was in the Abbasids, it happened. How did these Asharites interpret that?
They say this is an action of God. Because they believe in kasb. You remember maybe in Kalam we had this study, kasb, Nazariyatul kasb. That God creates actions in us. We are not responsible for them. We are just subject. Remember this idea of Ash'arites. So according to Ash'arites, there is no prior or independent understanding of justice. You have to learn this from religion. Remember, they said goodness and badness are shara'i, religious, not aqli, not zati, no intrinsic, no rational. Because there is nothing objective as good and bad, or just and unjust. We have to take it from religion, from God. So whatever God does is just. If God, for example, was telling us, you should not keep your promise, that was just. Now he says you should keep your promise, so this is not just. But he could have said it differently. He could say, I want to send good people to hell. That was just. So there is nothing against which you can judge and check, and say, this is just, this is not just. But we don't accept this. We say, when Quran says, Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl, it means adl is something that can be understood without command. Ya'muru bil adl means you can understand what is adl, and then God says you must observe adl. If adl means what is commanded by God, then inna Allah ya'muru bil adl means God commands to do what He commands. It's not making any sense. Okay?
Yes. I would like one
We will talk about it.
From you.
Pardon?
Can the son who calls his father inherit? Was normally being shared
No.
with the dad. But how about the Sunnis, the Asharites? Would they say can inherit from the father? Because they say it's an election of God. So if it's an election of God, he should be able to inherit. After killing the father, can he inherit the caliphate?
No, not necessarily, because this is a religious ruling.
So even the Asharites said that? They can't really...
So in the same way that, for example, a murderer can be punished,
Yes.
you cannot say because action of God there is no punishment.
Yes.
This is also possible that he may be deprived from some financial inheritance. You remember the story of that person who went to someone's garden and started eating from the fruits of that garden.
Yes.
The owner of garden came and started fighting and beating him with wood.
Yeah.
He said, why do you beat me? This is a creation of God eating from the creation of God. Why you are beating me? He said, a creation of God is beating another creation of God. Why you blame me? So if this is jab that you are eating, this is also jab that I am beating you.
I remember the story.
Yes. So, mutakallimin are divided into two major groups, as we said, Ash'arites on the one side, and Shiite and Mu'tazilites, which are called Adliya on the other side. Then he says, Ash'arites tried, they had good intention. They tried to somehow say that God is unique in creation. Everything is created by God. Everything is an action of God. He decides about everything and He does everything. But they did it in a radical way by leaving no role for human being and his free will. And then indirectly they made God responsible for any crime that takes place in the world. So they tried to protect God's unity, but then they brought all the blame to God. So you cannot blame criminals or unjust people because they have no role. Na'udhu billah, blames go to God. This is the problem. But we see that the Quran is not accepting this logic. Quran takes people, holds people accountable. Fir'aun has to answer. Namrud has to answer. They cannot say, you know, everything is done by God. Okay? Iblis wanted to use this logic. Say, رَبِّ بِمَا أَغْوَيْتَنِي. He wanted to say, you have deceived me. But it's not acceptable. He cannot say, you deceived me. Adam didn't use this logic. He said, إِنَّنَا ظَلَمْنَا أَنفُسَنَا. He didn't say, you deceived us by creating Iblis, for example. No, he understood that he is responsible. Then he refers to the fourth approach. So the first was Ahlul Hadith. Second, Ash'arites. Fourth, Shiite and Mu'tazila. But second and third are both mutakallim. Yeah? Ash'arites and Shiites and Mu'tazilites, these are mutakallim. The fourth is Hukama. And he means by Hukama, philosophers, Muslim philosophers. He says, we will mention later, that Muslim philosophers have taken another approach. They accept Tawheed Af'ali. Everything that happens is an action of God. But they don't deny our role. Everything is an action of God, but we are also agents. Because there is hierarchy. You remember we were talking in Aqaid, there is hierarchy of agents. God is the creator, but we are also responsible. And we gave you example, for example, the king can say, I made this, for example, bridge for you. The minister says, I made this bridge for you. The engineer says, I made this bridge. The labor, say, we did the bridge for you. It's okay. Or when you put the key and unlock the door and open the door, you can see the key, unlock the door, you can say my finger, you can say my hand, you can say I did this. So there can be a hierarchy. God is above all and he is the creator of everything. لا مؤثر في الوجود إلا الله. We believe in Tawheed Af'ali, but at the same time we don't deny our role. We are also part of this process. We occur in this chain, this hierarchy. And also Muslim philosophers accept that God is not doing zulm, but they have another definition or another understanding of this issue. For them, the issue is much more fundamental, and inshallah, he says later we will talk about this. Their approach has similarities with Shiite and Mu'tazilite approach, but there are also differences.
Excuse me.
Yes.
So the example that you gave, that's how everyone is in a chain, and the key example, that someone comes and opens the door with the key.
Yeah.
But isn't it different to us and Allah being in the chain? Because the person who is using the key doesn't have a choice. So the key needs to turn, the finger needs to turn because I'm ordering it.
Yeah.
Or the king who orders the bridge, the minister or the person, they have to listen. If they don't listen,
but they have choice.
well, they will get
Philosophically, they are free.
Yeah, no, this key
Even
doesn't
if
have
you are
choice.
forced, you are free.
But the key doesn't have choice.
Yeah, so I'm not saying that anything in this chain has free will. Some of them have free will, some of them have no free will. And those who have free will, some of them have choice, some of them have no choice. Angels have free will, but not choice. According to Muslim philosophers, angels have ikhtiyar, but not intikhab. Because they only choose what is good. So they are free, but they don't choose between good and bad. They only choose good because they only want good. Okay? So, some agents have free will, no choice. Some have free will and choice and selection, like us. Some have no free will, like instruments that we use. Okay? But what is important is that there is a hierarchy and they are all involved. So when we say God is the creator, we cannot say fire has no role, as Ash'arites say. Fire also has a role, although fire has no free will. But fire has a role. We don't deny causality, because Ash'arites deny causality. They say there is no aliyah. Adatullah jarat. We say no, causality is there, but we have different types of causes. Okay. According to the philosophers, the issue of divine justice is much more than what mutakallimin talk about this. It's more than a practical or moral issue. Then he says there is another group that also they are not mutakallim or philosopher, or they are not like Muslim philosophers. If they, or we call them philosophers, they are empirical philosophers, empiricists. People who deny anything unless it can be verified by empirical data. Like you have to see, you have to touch, you have to smell. So these people also, when it comes to this issue, then they have problem, because they have to find out what is the solution for this issue of, for example, this evil that exists in the world. Because their understanding of God is based on the data, empirical data. If there is conflict, they have problem. But we don't have problem because we prove existence of God rationally. And even if there is a case that we don't understand why God did this or why God permitted this happen, we say, I don't know, but I have already proved intellectually that God is knowledgeable and powerful and benevolent. So even if I don't understand the wisdom behind something, then I don't have problem. When you know someone is a very, very capable engineer, you don't need to understand everything that he does. You trust him. But if you trusted him by looking at what he has done, then if there are something that you cannot understand, then your trust in him collapses. Because this was the only way for you to. So, anyway, these are different approaches. And he says, we have to first start with defining adl. What is justice? What are different meanings or senses in which adl, justice, has been used, and then see which one is more suitable for us and how we can use it for God. I think I stop here, and inshallah we continue next week. وآخر دعوانا أن الحمد لله رب العالمين.
Very, very interesting. Thank you very much. Very interesting.